that was intense. I got him show ready, I guess, or close enough to where I felt like I wasn't totally embarrassed that he was at the art show. I got awards. I got let's see, the Norwestcon Art Show Beast 30 3D, and the People's Choice Beast 3D. So that's cool. Other people liked them. I'm so just like ground down to the bone from doing, you know, all those 30+ hour you know, straight grinding things. Wow. I still feel it's weird. I haven't even looked at this guy in several days. I took him to the show. It was like there for 3 days. I brought him back, just threw him in this like catastrophe mess of a garage, and just haven't even looked in here since then. I'm so wiped out. And I came back out here and suddenly I feel really tired again. It's crazy because I'm so close to being done. I feel like I'm 99.9% of the way. But you know, on a project that's been 1100+ hours, that's still a, you know, it's not nothing. It's still some elbow grease left to put into it, so I gotta figure out what's tickling my nose. What is tickling my nose? Stop it. Stop tickling my nose. Anyway, yeah, so I guess what I need to do first is figure out, like, just assemble them, look at them. I mean, I got a good look at them at the show for a couple minutes and had some initial impressions of what needs to be finished. You know, there's obvious things that jump out, like, it's funny, I have this at my day job all the time. It's a texture seam. See, it's like there's moss on this side or lichen on this side and not on this side, so there's just you know, simple little paint dabs will fix that. But also, you know, traveling with him, setting him up, several things broke, and so, you know, not in a major way, but like where's his feet? Like one of his hooves snapped. In general, the hooves did not want to stay on. I think because I'm like tilting them and placing them on the platform, and that just put too much pressure on them. So probably gonna drill some holes through these guys and epoxy them in really well. In general, the hot glue did not hold super well. His butt piece snapped off. So yeah, just a lot of these just little touch-ups. One of the biggest things that bothered me was just the overall lightness of the fur. I got him strung up on wires here just so it's easy to get all around him without having to have him on something I have to spin all the time. But yeah, in general, it's so monotone. Even though if you look really close, I mean, the fur has that nice dark to light thing going on, but because it just covers so much, that doesn't come across when you're at the, you know, when you're 5 to 10 feet away. It just looks like a big white sheet over him. So I'm gonna do some weathering, probably with the airbrush on that. I have to make a big picture decision, which I'm really not happy about, concerning the armor. It's I just really love this lichen effect that I got on there. You know how it's but it's colorful, and the actual art in the game is not. It's very monotone. And so I have to ask myself, Do I want to be more faithful to the game and like kill all those colors back a bit? I don't know. I mean, I feel like if you look at the individual pixels on that texture, you don't see that kind of green, but when you step back, it does kind of have that. So I don't know. I probably like it so much I'm going to leave it as is. I will probably do some airbrushing experiments just to see what happens if I darken some areas and lighten other areas with black and white through an airbrush. You know, it can't hurt to do that on a piece or two. And then of course I have the other stuff that I talked about before, like fixing these kind of gaps where it's like, well, you know, it fit at one point, but by the time I went through the process of putting all the layers of skin and stuff, it made things not fit as nicely. So I gotta fill a lot of gaps. So yeah, that's where I'm at now, and I guess it's just a matter of powering through this final stages. And yeah, almost done, huh? Almost done. Here we go. Alright, so now I am going to do some airbrushing. Now, when I airbrushed the fur in the last video or so, whenever, depending on how I lay these out editing wise, I was, under that huge time pressure crunch that I'm no longer under. Boy, it feels good not to be under that anymore. I mean, I still want to get this thing done, and it's so close to being done, so I think in general I just feel a little better right now. So I have time to tell you about airbrushes. I'm not going to go super into detail, other than to say there's two basic kinds of airbrushes. The kind you're going to get at like a hobby store probably is going to be a single action, and it's going to have a really crappy compressor, or you can get a really crappy compressor. If they're like under $100, it's probably really bad. If you want to do airbrushing on a regular basis, more than once a year or so, and you can afford it, I recommend probably spending anywhere between like $200 to $500. Just gonna put that out there. If you do less, you're probably gonna regret it, and you're gonna end up not using it because it's going to be a sucky experience for you. That being said, I actually believe I got this airbrush at Michael's. They sometimes, or quite often, have 50% off coupons, and amazingly they apply to these like $200 airbrushes. So it's like, boom, you save $100 or whatever. This one here is a Badger 105 Patriot, or Patriot if you're British, and it is just kind of a, where would that fall? It's, I guess, a prosumer maybe. Like, so I airbrushed t-shirts for many years, tried to make a go at it as a professional business. I set up booths, I went to carnivals and fairs, didn't work out. Doesn't matter. The point is I have some experience with airbrushes. The super cheap ones you get are going to be single action, meaning like it's literally just a button you press and it sprays. So it's basically like a miniature spray paint can, which is better than a spray paint can. But if you're going to do actual airbrushing, like on sculptures and stuff, you're going to want a dual action. That means you can press down and that makes air come out, but not paint. And then when you pull back on the lever, that determines how much paint comes out. So that just gives you much finer control. It takes a little bit to get used to, you got to practice, but yeah, if you're serious, you need a dual action airbrush. Badger is a fine brand. Last time I got an Aztec, it fell apart really fast. Iwata, I've heard, is generally good. You know what, just do a Google search for, airbrush ratings. I don't need to tell you all this stuff. There is one thing I will tell you that's quite remarkable, and that is this air compressor here. This is a June Air, and I got this air compressor back when I thought, hey, I should make a living doing airbrushing. You want to know how long ago that was? It was the year I graduated high school. It was 1993. This thing, and now I think it was about $1,000, so it was not cheap, but it's a quote-unquote silent air compressor, and yeah, it's gone through countless moves, well over 20 moves, and it's incredible that this piece of hardware still works from 1993. So, assuming that brand is still around and they're still, have the same standards they did back then, get a June Air. I'm sure they have ones that are cheaper than $1,000. Another reason it's really expensive, besides being quote-unquote silent, is that it has a big tank, so it's stored. It doesn't have to continually run like the cheaper units will. Okay, let's do some actual airbrushing. So, as per the usual, I'm going to be doing the underside first, where you're going to see the least. Why airbrush, you ask? Why not just keep using the paintbrushes? Look at this cool effects I've been able to get so far. good point. I'm going to tell you what airbrushing in general, now this is what I've heard. I actually, for owning an airbrush and an amazing compressor, I don't tend to use it much just because it's kind of a pain to get everything out, and then when you're done you have to clean it, you have to run it through, and it's best to have a spray booth, blah blah blah. So in general I tend to just use paintbrushes. What I understand, and we're gonna see if this bears out, is that it's great for 3D sculptures in that this is kind of game lingo, I don't know if this applies, but it bakes in occlusion. Oh boy, that was super lingo-y. I'm sorry for that. Let me just show you a visual example. You see on this thigh piece, there are these deeper recessed areas, right? And then these higher raised areas. Now, when I painted it with a paintbrush, they all have the same level of dark to light. Like, it's, you know, pretty close to black in the cracks, and pretty close to, I don't know, 30% gray on the high areas. And on the high, you know, the raised areas, just as dark, just as light. So what that ends up doing is giving you a very monotone overall finish. Like when you look at it from a distance, it all kind of just blends together as one big gray thing. Now if you look at the concepts here, look how dark that looks in that crevice compared to how light it looks on the ridges, right? Because this is a further out area. And so what that's basically simulating is occlusion. Occlusion meaning the amount of light that gets into recessed areas is less than the amount of light that hits the raised peaks. So what airbrushing does is helps with that scale issue, because this is scaled down. You know, this is supposed to be an 80-foot tall thing, but since it's so much smaller, you're not going to get the same light occlusion that you would with something that big. Maybe that makes sense? I don't know. It's certain things scale better than others. Like water scales really poorly, hair pretty tough to scale down, and light. Like when you look at miniatures in general, there's just, you know, like in movies and stuff where they're trying to fool you, if they have a miniature building or boat or house or whatever, or forest, that little like thing that just seems slightly off sometimes, it's often just the fact that the way light bounces and scatters and stuff doesn't scale. So this is super long-winded. That's my theory. I have not read that anywhere. That's just what my little artist eye / brain is concocting, so it can be complete BS, which stands for bull roar. Okay, so the point is, I'm going to take this airbrush with this black paint and spray it lightly into the recessed areas. I'm going to step back and I'm going to say, does that look better to me? And again, I'm gonna start on this part because this is the part that's going to be hardest for a viewer to see. So I think I'm going to hit where, let's see, so in CG, this is called the shadow gather, I think, because this is where like shadows are generally going to gather in creases and crevices. Not like it's a substance that sucks into that area, but effectively that's what it seems like. Oh, I want this. Okay, so pro tip number 6,873, don't take your clean airbrush that you just pulled off the shelf, pump paint into it, and then instantly spray onto your model. First spray onto something else to get a sense for how much comes out and make sure there's no clogs or spatters or that kind of stuff. So let me show you real quick, what the difference between a dual action and a single action airbrush is. The cheap single action, you're gonna press the button and it's gonna be like this. Well, probably more like this. Wow, this is coming out really lightly. I think there is a clog. Yeah, there's a clog. Okay. So let me deal with that. This is another reason that I tend to avoid airbrushing. There's just a lot of technical, mechanical, overhead shenanigans you need to deal with. If it's not perfectly clean from your last time, it can get paint residue that will clog up the tip. There we go. Okay. So here's my simulation of what a single action does. You press it, it does that. Okay. And what a dual action lets you do. Oh. Sorry, I think I jammed it funny. What a dual action allows you to do is start out with 0 paint, and then you slowly pull back and you can get a lot, and you can taper that down. Except it's still jammed open a little bit. I'm gonna have to just clean out this airbrush, and I will come right back to this demonstration. Uno momento, por favor. Alright, well, so I think this first pass overdid it. That's too much black. Although I'm not really devastated about it, because I'm looking to bring in some more of these really just stained dark areas here and there. So that's fine. But I did some more subtle work that I think I can replicate, that I could bring to the rest of the sculpture. But yeah, in general, this area is dark and in shadow anyway, so I don't care. So I will continue to kind of feel my way around this general bottom area, and then take a step back, look at it, and see if it's something I want to continue further. Alright, so I got a couple concerns from the airbrushing that I did. I feel like I made the fur a little too dark. So there's two potential solutions to that. One would be to rip it all off and apply another fur, which I really don't want to do that. So the backup plan is to see if I can color the tips. Now, I tried that with airbrush earlier, if you recall, and that did not work so well. So I'm going to try it with a paintbrush just to see. I don't know. We'll see. I really don't want to go to the nuclear option. So I've got this just matte fabric paint in white, and I have this Createx airbrush paint in pearlized. So I'm gonna mix a little of those together and do some tests on these swatches here. Not the hip watches from the 80s that you may recall, but little pieces of fabric. My primary question is, can I just kind of kiss the tips of the hair without getting highlights on the roots in any time-conscious way? I mean, I could pick up each individual strand like this, right? And then do that to it. And there is definitely a lighter tip. I don't know, maybe that's not too crazy. But yeah, if I could just drag my brush across it and get the same effect, that's obviously a better choice. I wonder if I use just the pearlized, what kind of effect that's going to give me. It's definitely less bright, less contrasty, which I think is good. Looks like it's fairly easy to blend too. Like if you look at this spot, you can see where the paint stroke starts. And I don't want that. I want it to be a nice smooth blend, and it looks like just by running my finger over it, it gets a nice smooth blend. So that's good. All right, I think I feel confident enough to try this on an actual piece. I might, where's my comb? I have a comb somewhere. I was thinking if I comb it a little bit first, that can help angle the stuff, but now my comb is gone. All right, well, let's try it combless first, and if that's not working, we'll go hunt down the comb. The dark really helps to unify everything, because I was feeling like the fur was just way too contrasty, but I think I overdid it with the airbrushing, and now there's not enough contrast. So probably want to leave it darker where it's, you know, coming closer to the skin, so there's a better transition. And I'm guessing with all this fabric paint on here, it's going to make it pretty much impossible to really comb through this hair, because pieces are going to be glued together. But I think I'll still be able to, you know, kind of massage it around in the directions I need. So I don't think that's a concern. We shall see if that prediction bears out. Yeah, I think that's probably closer to where I need to be. Is it significantly different? I can't tell yet. Let me push it a little bit further. I guess worst case scenario, well, second worst case scenario is I have to go back with the airbrush and darken it up again. But worst case scenario is the one I said before, which is tearing all the hair off and replacing it. Feeling a little bit like Icarus here, flying too close to the sun. I'm using heavier and heavier amount of paint on the brush just to see how far I can push this to get in little highlighted tips before it gets looking like it's painted. Because I think I would like some bright spots in there. I just don't want every tip to be as bright as it was. Ooh, I'm also thinking I might want to do the cutting first. I still need to do more like thinning and cutting, kind of styling. Maybe not on these hands, but I think I will on the other parts before I do the painting, because the cutter McDeely thing that my barber loaned me, you know, it's got this serrated thing where it might not be able to pull through painted hair as well. So, you know, I'm also, I think I'm liking the texture that I'm getting from this. It's breaking up those, so if you look at the raw fabric, it's got, you know, all these little triangular points that come out of it, right? And that's cool, but it's kind of this, the scale of it is not right for an 80-foot tall creature. And by painting it, I'm breaking up those larger forms, those larger triangles, into much smaller ones. And I think that's really helping with the perceived scale. So it's kind of a happy accident thing. It's kind of interesting, like so much of masterworks, like when you see a really good artist at work and they're just doing things that are breathtaking, it's funny to know, kind of a behind the scenes thing, is that a lot of those techniques and stuff just came about by accident. You know, they're just spending a lot of time doing their art and their craft, and they'll stumble across things like this, and you know, after years and years and years of fumbling and stumbling, you just build up this library of all these little techniques, tips and tricks. And yeah, so that I think that's a lot of what being a master is. I'll let you know once I get there, but you know, in the meantime, I've built up some amount of these things, and that's why I'm doing these videos, is because it gives me an opportunity to share that, and hopefully, you know, it'll save some people some amount of stumbling and fumbling. They'll be able to stumble and fumble onto different and better tips and tricks that hopefully then you guys will go and share with others. So that's my ideal kind of artistic community that I'd like to contribute to. All right, let's look at that next to this now. Yeah, so there's a significant difference. I feel like it's not super brighter, but perceptually it's just stands out more. Yeah, I just like it better, so I shall continue that with the rest. Let's do a little bit of trimming here. Okay, yeah, this piece here, I accidentally cut it along a place that it had been cut with scissors, so it has some parts that are shorter than I would like. So I want to kind of blend those in better so they don't just come to these chunks where it just stops. And that's what this is good at, it tapers. So a pair of scissors is two pieces that come down and just, you know, chop all the hairs at the same time. And this just catches some of them with the razor, but leaves others. And so you end up with a nice gradiated cut. And the more aggressively I push on it, the more hairs it's pulling out. If I want to taper it more gradually, I go in with lighter strokes. especially these places where I'm transitioning from the shorter hair to the longer hair. I want to go into the longer hair and shorten that up significantly, because I don't want to give this guy the look that he's actually been to the barber, and the barber, you know, cut his hair on his head short and left the beard long. It should be a nice, natural, smooth transition. So I told you the story about how my barber loaned me this, right? Her name's Nicole, and you should go to Enrapture Salon in, where's that located? North of Seattle. Just look it up, you'll find it. If you live in the Seattle area, look up Enrapture Salon and ask for Nicole Cooper. She is amazing. She could do normal hair too. She doesn't just do crazy stupid hair like mine. But she's the only person I've ever met, you know, out of all the places I've gone to get my hair cut, that can actually do what I ask her to do. And so that's impressed me. I've actually stalked her from store to store, I think through 2 different transitions. She used to work at Hair Masters and then moved to a different Hair Masters location. I followed her there, and then she got a job at Enrapture, and then, yeah, so. Tell her I sent you and she'll give you 50% discount. Just kidding. She won't give you a 50% discount. In fact, you should pay her 50% more, because she's that much better than other hairstylists, if you ask me. Plus, I mean, what barber is going to, when a client walks in with this head in their bag and says, "Hey, can you show me how I would cut this fake fur?" would be like, "Oh yeah, I can figure out how to do that," and then just like helps you figure it out, and then on top of it loans you her professional tools. Yeah, super cool person. One of the cute things about this Colossus's face, I thought, is these little tufts that come out of his cheek area there. It's kind of like, almost like super fluffy walrus whiskers or something like that. So I definitely want to make sure I'm capitalizing on that. Like they just kind of poof out, you know. But they don't poof out that far, so that's where this comes in handy. Alright, so taking a step back, I'm looking at the overall tone, the overall, well, value really. The values of, or relative brightness. Let's just say that. The relative brightness of the armor compared to the skin is almost identical. So if I'm super cool enough to note where I'm talking here when I'm doing the editing in 83 years from now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a blur effect here. And if you look at this blur effect, you will see that the tone, or the relative brightness is almost identical. And here, see my arm, I've got a black and white sweatshirt, right? And you see how there's light and dark. Even though it's blurred, you can see the difference. Now I'm not looking for that stark of a difference between the armor and the skin, but I'm looking for more than what's here. I'm looking for what we see in these pictures here, especially this one. You can see there, you know, there's patches of skin, but that armor really pops. Like, it's got heavy digital dry brushing, I'm gonna call it, on there. You know, you could see how bright those edges and details are that are pulled out of there. The contrast between the dark and the light is really extreme. Look at the face, the muzzle, how bright that is compared to the fur and all that stuff around it. So that leads me to the unfortunate conclusion that I'm going to have to pretty much repaint all of the armor. Now, not completely. Here's the trouble, because I did all this lichen all over it and, like, you know, stains and stuff. If I go in and lighten everything up, it's going to leave those, you know, if I do a dry brush, you know, like I'm saying, this looks like heavy dry brushing. If I do a dry brush over this armor, instead of dark in the shadows, there's going to be this weird green and yellow. And then I would have to go back in and try to match up another lichen pass on it, which would be weird and difficult. So I could go in and base it all out again with a flat gray, or, you know, a dark gray, maybe even black. You know, just obliterate all of that work I did before, and then do a dry brush and then do another lichen pass. The biggest difficulty in my mind, the biggest question is, how do I do that without removing the armor? Because the armor has now been, you know, set in place with epoxy for the most part. Well, some hot glue, some epoxy. It's on there very firm. I've been working over the past week to really solidify it, so it's not loose or wiggly at all. It's all on there very firmly. I could pry it off. It would probably do some damage. Damage is not a big deal on this case, since it's supposed to look damaged anyway. However, the process of getting it off and then getting it back on, what I found is that I run into, it's kind of like the issue of, okay, only kids from the 80s will know what I'm talking about. If you take a tape, you know, your cool Weird Al tape, Even Worse, or yeah, he's got an album called Even Worse because it sat next to Michael Jackson's album Bad, and it was awesome because it said bad here and even worse here, and you'd be like, that's hilarious. And it was hilarious. But anyway, you buy that tape and you want to share that tape with your friend, so you copy that tape onto a tape. And then that tape has a slightly degraded signal on it, right? Because whatever the process, it's a generation away from the original. And then their friend wants to share it with their friend, so they copy their copied tape onto another tape, and then that's yet again removed. And each time the quality kind of diminishes a bit. I'm running into the same thing with this. I kept having to make the waist wider and wider every time I would go in and futz with it and take it off and put it back on. There's ways around that if you're really fastidious and you go in and you make like perfectly interlocking parts. I didn't. I just kind of eyeballed it. I just, you know, made general slots that they would fit into, and right. Throughout the process, it got loosey-goosey, and I kept having to bulk everything more. I don't want to run into that again. I feel like I will if I remove the armor. Very long story short, I want to try to paint it while it's on there. I'm going to at least try. The good thing is that his skin is pretty much the same colors as the armor. I just want the armor to be lighter. So if I'm dry brushing, you know, a light gray on there, and I accidentally nick the skin, it's not like the skin is bright red or something and it's gonna be like totally apparent. Oh my gosh, there's a big mistake. It'll be easy to just kind of rub it into the skin and it'll be fine. So that is my theory for now. I'm going to try it the easy way first, which is just to do a light gray dry brushing over everything. Then I will do a wash, and again, because the skin has the same, you know, black wash on it, it won't matter if it leaks onto the skin. And I think that will cover most of the little cracks of the lichen that could cause problems. We'll see. Then I will go in for yet another lichen pass. Probably won't go as much as I did last time. I feel like it was used so much that it lost its specialness and just became kind of this mottled greenish effect on there. So yeah, that is my current thinking. Let's see how it works out. Just another note, just another reminder. You know, I said this is very bright. The highlights look very bright. Yes, they do look bright, but remember, it's because it's contrasting with super dark. So I'm not going to dry brush white on there. I'm going to dry brush a gray, and I'm going to kind of experiment to see how dark of a gray that needs to be. In case it's not clear what I'm doing here with this dry brushing technique that I'm kind of stumbling upon right now, is I'm using this longer, it's longer, slightly softer bristle brush to get the main highlights on there, but it's leaving kind of brush strokes here and there. And then I'm using this stiffer, stronger, but less loaded brush to then spread that around. Like, it's kind of scraping and pushing the paint, so it's diffusing those brush strokes that I'm getting from this. It seems to be a pretty quick and easy technique to kind of just blast the edges on there and then do that. I was kind of doing it with my finger before, but I'm liking this brush effect better. Seems to diffuse it better and less like a smeary finger, I guess. I need more control with the stiffer diffusing brush, so I'm using that in my dominant hand, which for me is the right hand, and the left one I'm just slathering it on, so it doesn't really need that much control. I'm just getting paint on the model with it. I'm not overly concerned with where it's landing. But I think it is giving me it's very quick and a good result. So that is the optimal combo. Actually, let me add a third element to that. It's quick, it's easy, and it's cheap. That is like the artist's dream right there. And by cheap, I mean inexpensive. Like, I'm using 10-year-old house paint for the black and, 99-cent craft paint for the white. And it's looking good to me. And these are not expensive brushes, so win, 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 win. The annoying, unfortunate part about painting armor when it's on a big, awkward body is it's hard to get all the angles that you ideally want to get. I think maybe a counterbalance to that on the flip side, you also end up with doing a not homogeneous thing because you're not getting all the angles. And when I had these individual pieces in my hand, I was able to do a very systematic approach to it, and I think that might be why I ended up with kind of like, it looked overly systematized. Like, if you look at your reference, it's like, what artist would just decide randomly, hey, I'm gonna make this row of blocks and this row of blocks really dark and smudgy, and then this whole area fairly bright and clean? Like, that's just something that generally is not going to occur in your artist's brain, at least not in mine. I would do something like, oh, every approximately 3 to 5 blocks make it darker, and every 10 to 20 blocks make it a little reddish. And then that would go over the whole thing. And that's kind of what happened with my lichen, is I was like, in the large cracks where there's a lot of dripping happening, I'm gonna do it there. And then I ended up doing that pretty much everywhere. And I think that was to the overall detriment of the piece. So a good thing about painting armor on the body is that it's super hard to end up falling into a trap like that, because you're just not able to reach every area with that much ease. I don't know if that made any sense. Makes sense to me. A lot of art, like I said just a bit ago, a lot of art is happy accidents. And a lot of the super awesome art that you see is the result of years and years and years of happy accidents that have been built into a library of successful techniques. Now I'm trying not to dry brush as strongly inside these depressed areas. I'm trying to mostly just hit the highlights, because again, I was going in and I was darkening those areas previously. With the airbrush, the disadvantage of the airbrush is that it just kind of dulls the entire thing pretty equally. So I still want to go in there and kiss a couple of those highlights, but just very subtly. And then on the edges and tips, much less subtly. There's probably a word for the opposite of subtle, but I cannot think of it right now. Please email me at my personal email to let me know what the opposite of subtle is. I'm just kidding, don't do that. I'll remember it the second I'm done recording. right, so having gone through, let's see, one paint job, two, well, I guess, okay, so I've done many layers. Let's put it that way. I've done a lot of layers of paint on this, and I don't think any of them were wasted. A lot of them are like barely perceptible. You know, the ones I did my first coat. A lot of the moss and the yellow lichen kind of staining is much more subdued, which I'm actually very happy with. I'm going to, after this project is done, I'm going to try to perfect this technique and get it down to like a very clear set of steps. Because I mean, what I went through was I was experimenting and learning while I was doing it, so that's not the optimal way to do stuff, obviously. But I'm a lot happier with where it's at now. I don't know if like the black and white problem is solved as far as like the armor being considerably brighter than the skin. I feel like it matches this image pretty well. Yeah, it's definitely, well, it's within that range. So there's a few small tweaks I want to make here and there. There are some areas that I feel like didn't quite get the depth that I want, the depth and contrast. Like specifically, look at this area here. There is this kind of like, you can see the lines between the bricks down here pretty well. They pop out, but here it gets really kind of washed out. So I'm gonna try to go in with some actual wash instead of my homebrew stuff. I think so the way I was doing the homebrew was with this, you know, just flat latex house paint mixed with denatured alcohol, and I was never measuring the ratio or anything, and at points I was just putting the paint on straight and then taking a brush that had denatured alcohol on it and spreading it around that way. So the kind of paint particulates to medium was all over the board. So I ended up with a lot of different effects, and that's fine. I didn't want everything to be totally homogeneous. There's just a few areas I want to go in and touch up. I think I'm okay with some of these dark streaks. I mean, I purposely put them in. I'm looking at it now and thinking, does that kind of mess with the composition at all? I kind of feel like it's still a good thing. I feel like the lighter stones are now better integrated than before I started the repaint process. And yeah, the only other thing of note is that I did the dark wash on these bone pieces as well, and I think that really helped to ground them, make them not, you know, stand out so starkly from the rest of the color scheme and everything. I think I'm gonna go in with a light dry brushing over this as well, and then I'm gonna coat them. I got a what did I get? This. I got some polyurethane. Oh, matte. Did I want to get matte? Well, I suppose if it's too matte, it's easy to just spray it over with a satin or semi-gloss. But the idea, the reason I'm getting varathane instead of just the spray coat is because the tips of the bones keep getting scraped against the floor and stuff as I'm taking them apart and putting them together and transporting them. So having a really strong, thick coat over that is going to be helpful. And yeah, so really close, really close. I was like, when I got to enter him at the show, I was at about 99.9. I'm gonna say I'm at 99.99 at this point. Like a couple more hours. The only other thing of significance, but besides this little bit of dry brushing, is kind of filling out the hair patch on Wander here and getting the way it affixes to the head down. I'm probably gonna do magnets like I did with the neck because it was so loosey-goosey. So yeah, here we go. Let's finish this. The nice thing about these super expensive washes as opposed to the cheapo stuff that I make myself is it runs into cracks really well and darkens them way better than what I was getting. So the downside, I feel like, is that it darkens the rest of the area around it as well, which I don't necessarily want, but in the few areas I'm gonna do it. I think it'll be fine. Also, you know, it's really easy to just do a light dry brush over it. But the more I keep going back over it with the dry brush, the more I'm wiping out some of that fun character of the lichen, moss, and little white speckles and stuff that I've been applying over the various layers. You know, with my homebrew wash, when I would get it in the cracks like that and then wipe over the surface, I was kind of wicking up a lot of the paint. I think because the denatured alcohol is so thin, it just gets sucked into the cloth really fast, and this stuff has a little more body to it, so it stubbornly stays in the cracks where I want it, while still being able to be wiped away on the surfaces where I'm rubbing with the towel. So that's all good. Yeah, it's just a matter of hunting down all the little areas I was displeased with before. Trying to remember where those are. Okay, so I was overly optimistic about the dry brush coat I'm putting on the horns. I thought that doing a very light gray on top of the kind of ivory and brown low lights would, I don't know, I shouldn't say I hoped. I mean, I shouldn't say I thought, I should say I hoped, against my better judgment, and it turns out my better judgment was right, that, yeah, they don't mesh. So I have to pretty much repaint all the bones, which is fine. I mean, it's just several layers of dry brushing I need to do. I think one thing I don't like about the ivory is that it pulls in a more kind of earthy tone than the rest of the piece has. And when you look at the pictures, these bone things don't have any bone color. They're just super desaturated gray, which the black wash that I did after I did the sepia wash hid a lot of that sepia wash, not all of it, which I thought was nice. There you could still see a little bit of that ivory warmth to it, but yeah, it just doesn't work with the highlights. So I'm going to go back in and I think do a medium gray dry brush, and then after that do a light gray. Yeah, and because I don't want to get it super bright again. They still need to stay darker, otherwise they stand out way too much. So, oh, look at this. Here's a great example of how it just does not work. See that nail there? The way it has like color around the edges, but not in the middle. Yeah, I don't know. It's just still feeling my way through this. At this point, I'm so close to being done, it's almost like laughable how little amount of work to just like, I could call it quits, but I'm so close. I'm just gonna keep tinkering until I get it to where I'm super happy, because yeah, like I said, I'm probably at over 1,200 hours now. Like, why not take another hour or two to make myself very happy instead of just mostly happy? Oh, I am gonna mix a little bit of the ivory in with the grays though, just to keep that hint, just a hint of bony life to it. Set pro tip. Let's see, we're probably up to 6 pro tips by this point, at least 6, maybe even 7. So to be safe, I'll say this is pro tip number 7. Bony life. That's all I got.